Hi everyone, my name's Tim, and welcome to the series on Ableton for the guitar player. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because I've seen a number of YouTube lessons and tutorials on Ableton and guitar, but they mostly focus on the live looping aspect of it. What I wanted to do here was take a from the grounds up, nuts and bolts, look at Ableton from a guitar player's perspective. By the end of this video, you'll have everything that you need to know, and more or less everything you'll need to get, in order to start jamming in Ableton. Now, one of the questions I never see addressed is, why Ableton? There are lots of other DAWs out there, why choose Ableton? Well, to me, it really boils down to session mode. Session mode is great for idea creation, jamming, practicing, and, ultimately, live performances. Some other DAWs have versions of this, but no one does it as well as Ableton. Ableton wasn't built for guitar players, but I think it is very conducive to the way that we think. The way that the effects are set up in Ableton very much reminds me of guitar stomp boxes, which is something that we're all familiar with. Additionally, down the road, we'll be looking at the hardware integration, which, in my opinion, can't be beat. Before we dive into Ableton, there's a handful of things that we are going to need. One is a computer, obviously. You don't need anything excessively powerful. On the Windows side, an i5 with 8 gigs of RAM will do. On the Mac side, before I upgraded, I was running Ableton on a 2012 MacBook Pro with 8 gigs of RAM. Hopefully you already have a computer. If not, you can probably find something around those specs for about $200 on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. The second thing you'll need is an interface, which gets our guitar signal into the computer. Now, my suggestion is to always go with the Focusrite Scarlett. It's ubiquitous, you see it everywhere, and there's a reason. It works, and it works well. It's also fairly affordable, somewhere in the neighborhood of a looper pedal. Now, if that's outside of your budget range, there are other options. When I first got back into recording, I was using a Rocksmith cable. You remember that, the game that was Guitar Hero, but with a real guitar? Yeah, I had that plugged into my computer. And it worked fine. And even since that time, there are a ton of products that you can order from Amazon. Basically, you're looking anything that will take your 1/4 inch out and go into a USB. And lastly, you're going to need a copy of Ableton Lite. Now, if you bought the Focusrite, you've already got it in your software package. If not, unfortunately, Ableton doesn't offer Lite for free, and instead it comes bundled with hardware such as keyboards or interfaces. Luckily, there's a few cheap workarounds. You can download the Koala Sampler, which is a mobile-based app, which will grant you a license key for Ableton Lite Live. Another place would be the Ableton subreddit. People are often posting live Lite keys there. And lastly, doing what I can, if this video can get 50 likes, I will pick somebody from the comments and I will gift them a copy of Live Lite. It's no 57 Gold Top Les Paul, I know, but it's what I got. All right, so with that, let's dive into Ableton. So we're inside Ableton now. If you've ever done any kind of audio editing or timeline editing, this probably looks a little strange to you. This is session view. Behind this, if you hit the tab button, is what we call arrangement view. And that probably looks a little more familiar to you in terms of a layout. I'm going to tab back to session view because that's what we're going to sort of work on here today. So again, it probably looks a little confusing, possibly a little intimidating to you. It's actually pretty easy once you have the overall sections kind of figured out. This main section here is what's called your session. If you look at it vertically, you'll see our various channel strips. I've got an audio, I've got a MIDI channel here, drum racks, which we'll get into in a little bit. I've actually pre-labeled this bass and guitar, even though they don't actually live that way. And then if I right-click here, I can insert an audio track, insert a MIDI track. So I believe in Lite, you have up to 8 tracks. But down the road, I can show you how you can condense those and get multiple tracks out of them. Just as a note, I am sort of cheating this as well on this Audio 5. This is actually this microphone here. So you can see I have the monitor set to in, and I'm actually recording this microphone through Ableton and then out to my video capture software. It's confusing and annoying, but it is what it is. On this side, we have our return channels and our master channels. So right now, this is set to a reverb and a delay. and obviously my master channel. So on the left-hand side, we have the browser section, and that's pretty much where all of your sounds live. Anything from your virtual instruments, the ones that are stock in Ableton, the plugins that you bring in, and your various effects will all live in here, as well as samples. At the bottom here where it says drop audio effects here is our clip view area. So I'm just going to take a random clip here. I'm just going to access that. Okay, so as you can see, there's a clip that lives here. This is a waveform in here. I can drop various audio effects into this area. So let's throw a random compressor onto there. And this is where that audio effect lives. On the other side of it here, again, we can see the waveform and some more complex things like warping, changing the BPM. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Okay, finally in this top section, we have some fairly important stuff. Over here on the top right, we have our CPU meter that just lets you know how much Ableton and its various plugins are taxing your computer. The more plugins you run, the more sounds you run, the higher the CPU usage is going to be. Generally, I've pushed it up to 60%, not really had too much of a problem. There are ways to reduce CPU load that we'll get into again down the road. Over here in the center, you have your transport controls, play, stop, and record. Okay, and on the left side, we have some things like our tempo. This project is currently set to 84.87, which is a fairly random tempo, but whatever. We have our time signature set to 4/4. For the most part, I'm going to leave everything in 4/4. It's just easiest that way. Everyone's favorite tool, the metronome. And then to the right of that, where it says 1 bar, this is actually a fairly important aspect of Ableton called the global quantize setting. And it's the thing that keeps everything in time and in sync with each other. It's the thing that kind of glues your whole project together. So if you ever used the old Ditto looper or any kind of looper pedal, you'll know that wherever you hit the button and start recording and then you stop recording, and wherever that happens is where it happens. That's not the case with Ableton. Since you're dealing with multiple tracks, it's trying to keep everything in sync and in tempo with each other, so that you don't end up with kind of a cacophony of noise or certain phrases starting at the 16th bar and then another starting at the 7th bar, and then, you know, as the track continues on, things will drift further and further apart. So that is what global quantize setting does. We'll demonstrate this a little later, but for now, I would just leave this on 1 bar. And when you leave it on 1 bar, what you're telling Ableton to do is whatever action I take, say if I just start recording something, it will wait until the next bar before it begins doing so. As we're just sort of learning Ableton, I would recommend leaving that on 1 bar just to kind of get used to the rhythm of everything. Okay, let's go make some noise. Now, as guitar players, I know that the first thing that we want to do is just start checking signal, make sure that we can play, right? So let's have our guitar plugged into our interface. If you're using the Focusrite Scarlett, make sure the input is set to instrument and the 48 volt button is not turned on. So to ensure that our interface is working properly, we're going to come up to Live up here in the corner and Preferences. Under Preferences, under the Audio tab, you'll see your driver type, your audio input device, which should be set to your interface, and your audio output device. Now for me, the audio output device is set to multi output device. That's because I'm recording this mic into video capture software, but under normal circumstances the video out would be set to by Scarlett as well. So okay, everything looks good with our interface, so at this point we're ready to start making some noise, right? So I'll head over to this channel strip here, which I've pre-labeled guitar, and I'll hit the arm record button. As soon as I hit this, I've told Ableton I want to start accepting signal into this channel. Since I have the Focusrite Scarlett, which is a 2-channel, I can choose between 1 and 2. I have my guitar set to 1, and I want to monitor at auto. Okay, so we can start jamming away now. Sounds kind of anemic and weak, right? That's because we don't have what is called a guitar VST in there. There's no amp. So essentially this is a little bit like if you were to plug your guitar directly into the aux in of a stereo. So in order to get a more sort of heavenly tone, we're going to have to use a guitar VST, which stands for Virtual Studio Technology. You can think of it as the amp that lives inside of your computer. Now, there are a ton of these at both the free and paid level, and they cover every type of amp for every type of genre. For this video, I want to stick to an overall guitar vibe and not get genre specific. We can do a rundown of various guitar VSTs, both at the free and paid level, in a later video. For now, I'm just going to use the VST that I usually use, which is the Corey Wong Neural DSP. If you don't have a VST yet, this is a pretty great all-around guitar package amp that'll cover everything from funk to blues, rock, reggae, ambient. It's great. It is $100, but it is great. So in order to load it, what I'll need to do is go into my plugins folder over here. As you can see, I have VST, Virtual Studio Technology, and under Neural DSP, I have my Corey Wong Archetype amp. So all I have to do is drag it down to here or drag it into the channel strip. Okay, so it's loaded up. Let's check it out. Yeah, much better, right? So if you're looking for a free guitar VST, I'd recommend checking out Guitar Rig 6, the player edition from Native Instruments. Amplitude and Bias 2 also have free versions, though they are limited. Like I said, we'll get into all of that later on. I've never been a big fan of using a metronome to record. I just sort of feel it's a little sterile, and prefer to use drum loops if I can. So you should have a number of drum loops available to you, I believe, under packs, if you're using the intro version. If not, there are drum loops obviously all over the internet. So I'm just going to grab this guy. Let's take a listen to him real quick. Big boomy, bonomy kind of sound. So my guitar track over here is still armed, so I can play over it right now. But nothing's being recorded. Again, I have to hit this button here in order to start recording. So, again, as soon as I hit that, because of Global Quantize, it's going to wait until this circle reaches all the way around. So, wait till it passes by. We'll pause. Silly. I actually forgot to turn up my guitar volume. Let's try that again. Good job. Let's try that. Okay, so as that passes by, hit record again. And then I would just hit space to stop. So you can see that we got 16 out of that, divisible by 4, so that should be a perfect loop. Let's try it out. Yep, that works. Okay, so in order to create a B riff, what I would do is take this clip, this drum clip, hit Command-C, Control-C on a PC, come to the clip slot beneath it, and hit Command-V, Control-V, and now I have a direct copy of that same loop. Similarly, I would then come over here to record our B guitar. Really ring up. Again, we have another 16 bars here. So now we can bounce back and forth between the two of them by hitting this play button over here, which will then will then play everything in this line or scene. Ready? Let's try it out. So if we want to lay down a bass track, all we would need to do is I would come over and duplicate this track. If you hit on this guitar line, right click, hit duplicate, or Command D, Control D, I believe on a PC. Make sure that you don't accidentally hit the delete one beneath it. We're going to take these same tracks, duplicate them over. We can remove these tracks. Arm down here, we're going to change this. We're going to rename this to bass. Oops. Learn to spell. And then if I come down here into, you see there are two tabs down here. In the second tab, this is all my audio effects. And in that audio effect is where my plugin lives, right? So by hitting that, I can, this for some reason showed up on my separate monitor, so that's why you didn't see it. Normally, if you were just in one monitor, as soon as you hit this gear button, it would just reappear. For some reason, this particular plugin really likes your main monitor to show up there first. Anyhow, I can then move over to, let's try a bass tone, for example. Let's try a P bass, sure, why not? Now, obviously, I'm playing a guitar. If you have a bass, at this point, you could take your input jack out, plug into a bass, off you go. And I do have a bass, but I want to show you guys a trick. So let's come up with the bass line real quick. So I have a very rudimentary, basic bass line, but it'll do. So again, I want to wait. At this point, I want to wait until the guitar riff circles around. Just before it hits, I'll hit record here. Okay, so we have a bass line recorded on a guitar. I'm going to double click on the clip, and you'll see the waveform comes up, which also tells me I'm a little off time. Now, in here, what I can do is I can take this pitch wheel here and pull it down 12 semitones, which is 1 octave. It's almost like using one of the whammy pedals. And more or less, we will have created a fake bass line. Let's give it a shot. And then let's repeat the process down here. Instant bass. And from here, I would just simply duplicate this channel again, delete the clips that are in here. Let's rename this as well. Let's call this guitar solo. Maybe change out our tone. All together. So it's not the most revolutionary track in the world, but you can keep adding more stuff if you want to, getting crazier and crazier with it. different drum breaks, all of that stuff. We'll get into how to use the drum rack down the road to program your own drums, but for right now, I just wanted to kind of get you guys started and playing around with Ableton and making noise with it. With each of these tracks, something that I should note here, you do also have control over your volume level and your panning. So in this case, between the two guitars, we can kind of create a dual guitar stage setup in an auditory fashion. Your bass, you're always kind of want to leave dead center. Your sends here, so these should default to reverb and delay. If you wanted to add a little reverb in to your guitar signal and not necessarily use the VST reverb, but an actual, like the, essentially the room reverb of the studio, you can pull up this send, and now see from this side we're getting level, and then you would have reverb control in here. So let's just take this for example. Like, let's take this delay just to show off like how sends and returns work. I'm going to take this solo, and I'm going to really crank the delay. So you can see we sent the guitar solo over to this return channel. The plus side in using this is that I can also, if I wanted to, send the bass and let's say the drums over. I don't know why you would ever do this, but that means that there is just one effect unit processing these three things instead of three effects units processing three things. This actually does help keep your CPU level down. It's less taxing on your system. Okay, so I think that's sort of our basic overview for this first session. Again, next time around, we will be in the arrangement view, and I'll be showing you how to record full tracks. So take the ideas that we generated here and arranging them out. Please let me know if there's anything that you'd like to see or any questions that you have on this. Again, if you don't have a copy of Ableton Live Lite and would like one, you could enter the contest, and I will give one away before the next video. Okay, we'll see you guys soon. Take care.